It had been 2 weeks since I found out. I couldn't stop thinking about it. My sister Emma had sold our family's lake house without even consulting me. It wasn't just any house. It was the place where we spent every summer as kids. The one spot where all the memories of my parents, my brother, and me felt real. The smell of fresh pine trees in the air, the sound of the water lapping against the shore, the laughter echoing across the porch. Those moments meant the world to me. I had always assumed that one day I'd take over the house. After all, my parents were getting older, and I'd been the one who kept the house alive, maintaining it over the years, even when Emma and the rest of the family barely visited. The news had hit me like a slap in the face. It wasn't just the house, it was the fact that Emma had done it without telling me, without asking. I didn't even know she was considering it. I called her the second I heard. She picked up on the first ring, sounding so casual, like it was no big deal. "Oh, Scarlett, I sold the lake house. I figured it was time to let go of the past." Her voice was too light, too detached. I couldn't believe it. The words barely made sense. She had sold it, just like that? I felt a mix of shock and anger, but I kept my voice steady. "Emma, you can't just sell it. It's been in our family for generations. Don't you think we should have talked about it?" Her response was cold, almost dismissive. "You've barely been there, Scarlett. You've always been too busy with your life to bother with family. Honestly, it's a burden now." Her words stung more than I expected, but I didn't say anything. I hung up, my head spinning. This was a betrayal, and I knew it. But as much as I wanted to scream, I held myself back. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I couldn't let Emma get away with this. The house wasn't just hers to sell. It was mine too, or at least it should have been. But she didn't know that I had already taken action, even before I got that phone call. I'd made sure that the house would never truly leave the family, no matter how much Emma thought she could just wipe it away. A year ago, when Emma had started talking about selling the lake house, I'd quietly made arrangements with a lawyer and a financial advisor. I'd purchased the property from our parents, though they had no idea. I set up an LLC in my name to keep the transaction under the radar. To everyone else, the house was still part of the family, but legally, it belonged to me now. I didn't tell anyone because I knew how they'd react, especially Emma. She never respected the house, and she definitely didn't respect me. I'd spent the past year making payments through the LLC, paying off everything. I didn't care if they thought I was just another one of their silent helpers. I didn't need their approval to make the right decision. It was my choice. My family didn't understand me, but I understood this. Emma was never going to appreciate what the lake house meant. Now, after hearing that she'd gone ahead and sold it, I felt a surge of determination. Emma had no idea what was coming. I'd let her play her little game, but I was about to remind her who truly owned that house. When I called the lawyer the next day, he confirmed everything. I was in control now. I had the paperwork ready. The house was mine. But I wanted to wait. I wanted her to think everything was fine, that she had gotten away with it. Let her enjoy her victory for just a little longer. 2 days later, Emma texted me. "Hey, we need to talk about the house. I've got the check from the sale. You need to sign off on it." She was acting like I was some sort of formality, something she could just run over. But I was done with that. I wasn't going to sign anything. Instead, I walked into the living room, sat down, and started preparing. I emailed the lawyer, confirming that we were ready to proceed. The purchase agreement would be finalized, and Emma would soon find out the truth. But I had more to do. I had to make sure everything was in place for the next step. The next time we spoke, Emma didn't even know she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She was still so sure she had won. I let her talk, but every word she spoke about the sale, about how she was going to take her share and run, made me more resolved. This was the moment I had been waiting for. It was a few weeks later when the email came in. The sale had been completed. The check from the buyer had cleared. But in my inbox was something much more important. A notification from the lawyer. The final paperwork had gone through, and just like that, I owned the house. The truth hit Emma a few hours later. I texted her, Check your email. You'll find a notice that the lake house is no longer yours. I wasn't angry, not anymore, just calm. I'd let her think she could get away with it. But now she had to face the reality that the house she thought she had sold was now legally mine. She called me immediately, panic evident in her voice. What do you mean? The house is mine to sell. I signed the papers. I replied, No, Emma. You sold it to the wrong person. You sold it to me. For the first time, there was silence on the other end. I could almost hear her brain processing the words. What? How did you even? She stammered. I couldn't help but let a small smile form. I guess you didn't know everything, did you? The house is mine now. You're just a tenant. Her anger flared and she started shouting. This isn't fair. You had no right. But I was calm. You sold it behind my back, Emma. You had no right either. You didn't ask. You didn't care. But I made sure the house would stay in the family, no matter what. She was furious, of course. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I'd let her be angry for a while. Soon she'd realize she'd been played. But by then it wouldn't matter. She had already lost. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up for myself, finally taking what was mine, and showing Emma that she couldn't just do whatever she wanted without consequences. She would have to live with the fact that, in the end, I got the house. And she got nothing. The days that followed were a whirlwind of messages, calls, and emails. Emma tried everything to get me to reverse my decision. She called me at odd hours, demanding explanations, accusing me of betraying the family. She sent long, angry texts, filled with guilt and accusations, each one more desperate than the last. But I didn't respond right away. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she had any power over me anymore. I needed her to stew in her frustration, to realize that she had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The most infuriating part for her was that she couldn't figure out how I had managed to pull this off. She didn't know I'd been quietly paying for the house all along, covering everything while she thought she was making a simple sale. She had no idea that I'd worked out the details with a lawyer a year ago, arranging everything so that the house would be legally mine when the time was right. The fact that she had sold it to someone who didn't even exist to her was the ultimate slap in the face. A week later, I got a call from my father. His voice was tight, the kind of forced calm that only came when he was pretending things weren't as bad as they seemed. Scarlett, he began, his tone too polite, we need to talk about the lake house. I didn't answer immediately, letting the silence stretch for a moment. He knew, of course, that I was in control now, but he was too proud to admit it. What's there to talk about, Dad? I replied, my voice steady. It's already been decided. I know, he said slowly. But Emma, she's in a real bind. She thought the sale was done. She's been crying about it, calling it a betrayal, and we don't know what to say to her. I felt a small pang of guilt, but it quickly faded. This wasn't my fault. She had pushed me to this point. Dad, you should have had her come to me first, I said, but she didn't. She sold the house without talking to me, without thinking about what it meant. Now she's upset? That's not my problem. I heard him sigh. He didn't like confrontation, but he had to know this was inevitable. You've always been the more reasonable one, Scarlett, but family, we're supposed to stick together. I didn't hesitate. I did stick together with the family, Dad. I kept the house alive all these years. I paid for it, I maintained it, and now I'm the one who owns it. Emma took that for granted. She thought she could just walk in and sell it like it was hers to give away. The line was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer now. I see your point. But don't forget, we've been through a lot as a family. We've all sacrificed in different ways. I wanted to snap at him, to remind him how much I'd sacrificed for them over the years, how many times I'd picked up the slack, how many times I'd been taken for granted. But I didn't. Instead, I simply said, I'm sorry, Dad, but this time, Emma crossed a line. I'm not going to undo what's been done. I won't be her backup anymore. It felt final. I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Later that day, I received an unexpected text from Emma. It was short, almost too casual. "We need to talk. This isn't over." I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling a strange sense of calm. I knew what was coming. She would try to guilt trip me, try to make me feel bad for doing what I did, but I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. I picked up my phone and responded simply, "I think it is, Emma." The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Emma didn't try calling me anymore, and the texts stopped. I could feel the tension building, but I wasn't about to make the first move. Let her figure it out. She would come around eventually. She always did when she needed something from me. A few days later, I was sitting at home, looking over the final documents for the lake house sale when I received an email from Emma. She didn't even try to be polite this time. It was a demand, pure and simple. "You can't just take everything from me, Scarlett. I want my share. This isn't right. You owe me." I felt a flash of anger, but it quickly passed. I wasn't going to give in. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. I didn't owe her anything. I had worked for this, I had planned this, and I was done playing her game. Instead of replying immediately, I forwarded the email to my lawyer, asking for advice on the best way to proceed. I knew Emma would try to push this further, try to get me to give in, but I was ready for her. I had already made my decision, and I wasn't about to change it. By the time the weekend came around, Emma finally called again. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Her voice was trembling with frustration, barely able to hold back tears. "Scarlett, you can't do this to me. I'm your sister. You're ruining everything. I thought we were family." I didn't flinch. "We are family, Emma. But family isn't about taking and never giving back. You sold the lake house without even consulting me. You never even cared about what it meant to me. You only cared about the money." Her silence spoke volumes. I knew she hadn't expected me to be so firm, so cold. She thought I'd cave in like I always had before, but she was wrong. "I'm sorry, Emma," I continued, "but the house isn't yours to sell. Not anymore." The line went dead, and I felt a strange sense of peace. I had done it. I had taken control, and I wouldn't be letting go. The following days were a strange mix of calm and tension. The emails from Emma slowed to a trickle, and the phone calls stopped completely. I knew she was processing what had happened, but I wasn't sure how long it would take for her to come to terms with the truth. I wasn't naive. I knew she'd try something else. She always did when she felt cornered, but for now, I was free from her constant demands. I was finally able to breathe without feeling like I was always running on empty, giving and giving until there was nothing left for me. The first real confrontation came unexpectedly. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was sitting on the porch of the lake house, a mug of coffee in my hands, enjoying the peace and quiet. The sound of the water lapping against the shore was soothing, a reminder of the many summers spent here with my family. It felt like everything was finally falling into place. I hadn't realized how much I missed the serenity of the lake until now. Emma's betrayal had stolen my peace for a while, but now I was taking it back. That's when I saw the familiar car pull into the driveway. It was Emma, of course. She got out of the car without hesitation, her face a mask of determination and anger. She looked almost the same as she had when we were younger. Same sharp eyes, same defiant stance. But there was something different about her now. Maybe it was the way she walked, like she knew she had to confront me. But deep down, she knew she had already lost. She didn't say anything as she made her way up the steps to the porch. I could hear her footsteps echoing in the silence. I didn't move. I didn't even offer her a seat. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions, not have any illusions of control over me. She was no longer the sister who could just demand things from me whenever it suited her. When she reached the top of the porch, she stopped and crossed her arms. "You've made your point, Scarlett," she said, her voice low, like she was trying to hold back a tidal wave of emotion. "You got the house. You made sure I didn't get anything. But this..." She waved her hand around the lake, around the house we had both grown up in. This isn't just about money, it's about family. I raised an eyebrow. Funny, I said, my tone steady. I thought this was about the house, Emma. About what you thought you could just sell without even telling me. She winced at the mention of that, but she didn't back down. You don't get it, do you? You've always been the responsible one, the one who does everything right. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? You just buy the house and pretend it's all about protecting our family legacy. But it's not. You just wanted to show me you could take control. You wanted to make me feel small. Her words hit harder than I expected, but I refused to let her see it. I had spent too many years letting her dictate the terms of our relationship. Not anymore. Emma, I said slowly, this wasn't about making you feel small. This was about me finally taking control of my own life. You don't get to walk all over me anymore. I'm done letting you think I'll just fall in line because I'm your sister. She looked like I'd slapped her. Her face flushed, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But then the anger returned, stronger than before. You're going to regret this, Scarlett, she spat, her voice shaking. You can't just throw away everything we've been through. You can't just take away the one thing that meant something to me. I didn't flinch. You sold it. You didn't even ask if I wanted it. You didn't care what it meant to me. Now you're angry because I did what you couldn't. Keep it in the family. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm taking back what's mine. There was a long silence as she stood there glaring at me, trying to find the words to make me feel guilty. But I didn't feel guilty. I felt nothing but a calm sense of satisfaction. Emma's words had no power over me anymore. She was the one who had crossed the line, not me. You always were the perfect one, she said, her voice bitter now. The one who did everything right, who never needed anyone. But in the end, you're just like the rest of them. You're selfish. You've always been selfish. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was as if her words, meant to hurt, had finally lost their sting. For years, I had been the one carrying the weight of my family's expectations, always trying to live up to their idea of who I should be. But not anymore. Maybe I'm selfish, I said quietly. Maybe I've been selfish my whole life. But I'm done sacrificing for everyone else. I'm done being the backup. The perfect one doesn't exist. I'm just me, and that's enough. Emma didn't say anything after that. She just turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. It was over. I had finally taken back what was mine. The lake house was more than just a property. It was my victory, my independence. I watched her drive away, feeling an odd mixture of relief and sadness. I had done what I needed to do, but it didn't mean I was happy about the damage it caused. I loved the lake house, and I loved the memories attached to it. But I couldn't ignore the truth. Emma had never respected me or my place in the family. She had taken me for granted for too long. Now it was my turn to do what was best for me. As I sat back down on the porch, the sun dipping below the horizon, I couldn't help but smile. The lake house was mine, and so was my future. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. After Emma's visit, she stopped trying to contact me altogether. I knew she had retreated, licking her wounds and figuring out her next move. It didn't bother me in the slightest. I was finally living without the constant tension and manipulation. The house had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where I could breathe without the weight of family drama pressing down on me. One evening, as I sat on the porch overlooking the lake, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was strange because I wasn't expecting anyone, and Emma had stopped showing up at the house. I wasn't sure who it could be, but I stood up slowly and walked inside. When I opened the door, my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't Emma. It wasn't even a family member. It was someone I hadn't seen in years. My cousin Claire, the one person in the family who hadn't taken sides when everything with Emma blew up. Claire looked nervous, her usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. She smiled weakly when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, Scarlett," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Can I come in? I really need to talk to you. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let her in. She had always been the one who seemed to understand me, even when the rest of the family didn't. But there was something different about her now, something in her eyes that told me she wasn't here to reconcile. She sat down across from me, her hands tightly folded in her lap. I've been talking to Emma, Claire began, avoiding my gaze. And, well, she's pretty upset. You know that, right? I nodded. I'm aware. Claire took a deep breath. Scarlett, listen. I know what you did wasn't easy, and I know why you did it. But you can't just cut yourself off from the family. This whole situation, it's hurting everyone. I mean, Emma's a mess. And your parents. They're both so disappointed. They don't know what to do with themselves. I didn't let her words sink in. Instead, I simply stared at her. I didn't do this for them, Claire, I said, my voice firm. I did it for me. No one ever asked how I felt, how much I was giving. And now I'm finally standing up for myself. If they're disappointed, then that's on them. Claire's eyes widened, and she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I get it, I do. But you know that what you did, it's not just about the house, right? It's about family. You've always been the one who held everything together. You've always been the one who gave and gave. Now you're pulling away, and they don't know how to fix it. I was silent for a moment, letting her words wash over me. The silence between us grew thick. It was true that I had always been the glue, the one who kept everything from falling apart. But the weight of it had crushed me. I had spent years trying to please people who would never be satisfied, never appreciate the effort. And the lake house, the one thing that had always felt like mine, had become the symbol of that sacrifice. Now, I didn't just own it physically. It was mine in every way, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. I'm not pulling away because I'm angry at them, Claire, I said quietly, the words finally coming together. I'm pulling away because I've been invisible to them for too long. They used me. I was always the one who had to fix everything. But when I needed them, they were never there. Claire looked down, her face softening. She nodded slowly, understanding what I was saying but clearly struggling with the consequences. You're right, I guess I don't want to see you isolated. I know you've been hurt, but family is supposed to be there for you. No one else is going to look after you like they will, even if they've messed up. I could hear the care in her voice, but I wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. I don't need their approval anymore, I said, standing up from the chair. For once, I'm doing what's right for me. Claire didn't argue. She simply stood up and walked toward the door, pausing before leaving. I get it, Scarlett, but just don't close yourself off completely. You've got people who care about you, even if it feels like they don't. You've got me. Her words hung in the air as she left, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of something. It was a tiny seed of doubt, of regret, maybe, but it was fleeting. In the end, I had done what I needed to do. I had reclaimed my place, my power, my life, and I couldn't let that go. As the door clicked shut behind her, I stood in the quiet of the house, the weight of everything finally starting to settle. I had taken a lot of hits in my life, from family, from the people who should have been there for me. But now, the lake house wasn't just a house. It was my statement, my stand, the place where I had taken control. No more sacrificing, no more being the backup. I smiled to myself, walking back to the porch. It was a new chapter, a fresh start. I had my family's legacy, but I was writing my own story now. And for the first time in my life, it felt right. The next few days were quiet, but they weren't peaceful. I kept to myself, spending time in the lake house, enjoying the solitude I had longed for. I didn't mind the silence. In fact, I craved it. It was the first time in years that I felt like I could breathe without the weight of expectations hanging over me. Emma's absence, while painful at times, was also a relief. I wasn't constantly battling her or her demands anymore. I was finally able to focus on what mattered to me, myself. But then came the final blow I hadn't seen coming. It was late one night when I received an email from my father. He'd always been the more reserved one, never one for confrontation. But this was different. The subject line was short and to the point. "We need to talk about the house." I hesitated before opening it. I knew what it would say. I had been prepared for it. But the words still hit me harder than I expected. "Scarlett, I need you to understand that this situation has gone too far. The family is falling apart because of this. Emma is devastated, and your mother and I can't stand to see this tear us apart. You need to come home. We need to fix this." I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. The guilt crept in, but it was quickly drowned out by the anger that had been building up over the years. My father had always been a figure of authority in my life, but now all I could hear in his words was weakness. He was pleading with me, asking me to back down so that the family could move on. But I knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't about moving on. It was about the fact that they had never truly seen me for who I was. They had only ever seen me as the one who could fix everything, the one they could rely on when they messed up. I composed myself before typing a response. "Dad, I understand that this is hard for all of you, but I did what I had to do. I didn't just buy the house to take it away from Emma. I did it because I wanted something of my own. For once, I wanted to be the one to make the decision, to take control. I am not going to back down just because it's inconvenient for you." The silence that followed was deafening. I knew it would be a long time before they understood. And maybe they never would. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I had made my choice, and I was sticking to it. That night, as I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something profound. I had spent so many years trying to make everyone happy, trying to fix things, to smooth things over. I had played the role of the responsible one, the one who could always be counted on. But in the process, I had forgotten about myself. I had let everyone else dictate my life. The lake house, in a way, had become a symbol of that. But now it was mine, and it meant more than just the physical house. It was a statement, a declaration that I wasn't going to be the one who always cleaned up after everyone else. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was doing the right thing. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I was. A few days later, I received another email from Emma. It was brief, almost like a last attempt to reach out, but this time it was different. "Scarlett, I've been thinking. I was wrong. I shouldn't have sold the lake house without talking to you first. I'm sorry. I was just trying to get away from everything, and I thought I could make it work without you. But I see now that I was wrong." I didn't reply right away. In truth, I didn't know what to say. The apology felt empty, like it was only offered because she had no other option. But I couldn't deny that a part of me wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, Emma would see the truth. See that I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just trying to protect myself from a lifetime of being invisible. Instead of responding right away, I picked up my phone and called Claire. She picked up after a few rings, sounding relieved to hear my voice. "Hey, Scarlett. I was just about to call you. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady. I don't know what to make of all this. Emma's apology. It feels like it's too late." Claire was quiet for a moment before she responded, her voice softer now. "I think you're right. It's never going to be the same, but maybe that's okay. You've changed, Scarlett. And maybe it's time that your family does too." I sighed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "I think you're right. I've done enough for them. Now it's time to do something for me." That night, I sent a short message back to Emma. "I appreciate your apology, but things have changed. I've made my decision. I'm not going to ask for forgiveness, and I'm not going to offer it either. The house is mine now, and I'm not giving it up." It felt final, but it felt right. The following months were a blur. Emma and my parents tried reaching out a few more times, but I didn't engage. Slowly, they stopped. The lake house became my sanctuary, a place of peace and self-reflection. I knew that, eventually, they would understand, but it wouldn't be because I caved. It would be because they saw the strength I had found in standing up for myself. The last time I visited the lake house, I sat on the porch, looking out over the water, the house around me feeling like home for the first time in years. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and now it was mine to keep. The family would never be the same. But I had found something much more valuable than family approval. I had found myself. And that, I realized, was worth more than anything else. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I smiled. It was finally over. And for the first time, I was truly free.